Esta noche fue la noche que llegó toda la esperanza de un futuro lleno de amor y mucho orgullo, a un pueblo que se ha olvidado a dónde va y de dónde viene.
The Puerto Rican diaspora brought a new wave of workers to the arsenal of democracy, a city in need of workers for its armaments industry during World War II. The Puerto Rican worker was perfect. American citizens eager to migrate to neighborhoods, work in factories, and shop in Bridgeport's buzzing downtown. Recently, some of the descendants of that migration gathered at a downtown Bridgeport watering hole, Murphy's Law, to reflect on their community and one of its champions, Cesar Batalla, who once patronized that establishment with them. How was it that you knew him?
Well, because at that time, every Puerto Rican knew each other. in the city of Bridgeport, people knew each other.
Cesar used to come to our house. When we lived on Pembroke Street, he would come to my parents' house.
He came to this country, he came to Connecticut as a young kid, and it wasn't really under the best circumstances. My grandmother died young, and she was a very sick person when she had my father. She had tuberculosis at the time. So it was a lot of kind of my father being taken care of by others in the family because his mom was very, very sick.
Those experiences would influence a slightly built, empathetic young man from Aguas Buenas, Puerto Rico, where his father had been the mayor. Here in Bridgeport, some of the Puerto Rican neighborhoods his community lived in eventually were torn down for highways or model cities development. The Batallas once lived in Pequannock Apartments, now a dirt parking lot. In Evergreen Apartments, now a supermarket. After attending Bassick High School and the University of Bridgeport, he was drafted into the Vietnam War. He served until he was summoned back home because his mother was sick. She died before he could see her or before she could know the mark her son would make. Soon after, Batalla saw firsthand the effects of police brutality during a 1970s Young Lords Party anti-slum protest on East Main Street. The man who would work for City Trust Bank before taking a job at Southern Connecticut Gas as a community relations director had his eyes really opened when Willie Matos, his new Young Lords Party friend, led a protest against gas company policies.
And a lot of people, service was turned off a lot of times in the middle of winter. It was really a cruel policy, okay? And we organized and protested against it. And one of the places that we picketed was a gas company.
When you say we, you mean?
We was an organization at that time that was known as SPIC, S-P-I-C.
Which stood for?
Spanish Power and Command.
Okay, got it.
He was on the inside, but he wasn't involved in anything. That prompted him to get involved.
So he recognized your protest and what you were fighting for.
And he sort of embraced it, in a way. And from there on, new issues came up, and we worked on them together. From
the 70s to the 90s, Cesar was everywhere, speaking up for people who may not have known the language well enough to speak up for themselves. Cesar Batalla was a fighter. Well, what the hell, his last name means battle, and his first name is synonymous with the leader of battles. Cesar Batalla was a relentless fighter for Puerto Ricans and all underserved communities. During his lifetime, he worked with many social organizations, including the Puerto Rican Coalition, which he led for more than 20 years.
All of us were at the Common Council. I can't even remember why, because we went there so many times. And he said to me, go up, go say something. And I went, and I looked at him, I said, what do you mean, go say something? He goes, go ahead, go say something. And so I said, what am I gonna say anything for? Nobody's gonna listen to me. He goes, go say something. And that was how it all began. He pushed me to go say something.
She hasn't stopped saying something since.
He opened up a Pandora's box. He was doing everything. And I remember saying to him, I said, Cesar, why don't you focus on one thing? You're all over the place. And he says, because everything is interconnected. You have to be doing everything, Alma.
Wow.
And that's the way he was. He had his hand, he touched everything, economics. I remember, trying to get translators at Bridgeport Hospital. The after, trying to get kids back in school.
Minorities in the police department.
Minorities in the police department, along with Willie and the NAACP. And he was a person that could bring people together because he had that kind of personality that could bring people together.
We were kind of working towards the same goals, but like we were challenging what was called the power system at the time from the streets, and Cesar was challenging them from within. Okay, sort of. We came together on a number of issues.
I remember Cesar because as a journalist, as a reporter, you always need somebody to go talk to. Cesar Batalla was always at the top when it came to Bridgeport issues. So I would interview him, like Chichi Rodriguez came to town, the famous golfer. He would take a group of kids to see Chichi Rodriguez. So I would interview him about that or this or that or whatever. One of the organizers of the clinic, Cesar Batalla, says he doesn't expect today's lessons to produce many championship golfers, rather a positive outlook.
And this is what we hope that the kids will see, that there are Puerto Ricans that are achieving at the national level, that there are Puerto Ricans that are at all levels, and that there are other role models that they could look up to.
He was the suit. He was the suit. And he could go in and talk to the mayor. He could go in and talk to the president of People's Bank. And we could be on the outside yelling and screaming, but he was on our side. And it's like, I don't think they figured it out, but he was on our side.
How did he pull that off? He's working for the gas company, and he's the biggest activist in the state of Connecticut. How does that happen?
They didn't like that.
But they couldn't fire him.
No, they couldn't.
I think that what he did was that he cultivated the friendship and the help of so many people in the community on the outside that the gas company actually was afraid to touch him.
Afraid to touch him. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think they were.
That makes sense.
And he took his chances, and that's one thing that makes him stand out, because we've had other leaders in the community, and we had other leaders at that time, but hardly any of them ever took a chance like Cesar used to take, speaking up and not worrying about whether he was going to have a job the next day.
A Nueva York se acercaba un peón de las Marías. Con esperanza decía de un largo día y volver, pero antes me hizo nacer.
Lisette Andino had heard from everyone in town about the man who once worked in the now abandoned building at 880 Broad Street. That's because she took the gas company job Cesar once held.
He would, kind of go toe-to-toe to a lot of people. And I think at the company, they trusted a lot of things that he was doing. If it was going to for the betterment of the community, that's his job. He was a voice that no one in the company had, and they needed that.
All the activism did not come without a cost and sacrifices by his family, who had to share him with an entire community.
My father was gone a lot. I didn't see him, he was not there for dinner. He was never there for dinner. My mom picked up the slack. My mom was very stable. She was the opposite, she was always there. But we had just understood, it was just the way that we lived, that my father was always going here and there and always at a meeting or going to a meeting or coming back from a meeting. My house phone rang nonstop. I was my father's secretary at home. So I knew that he was definitely a person in the community that people would seek out.
One of Batalla's final legacies was the creation of Aspira, an educational program aimed at Puerto Rican youth. Unfortunately, during that effort, Cesar was diagnosed with leukemia.
I worked with him pretty closely in the last couple of years of his life as we were really trying to open the Aspira building, getting the Aspira building up and running. And it was really gratifying to be able to work with him and see that happen, see that day happen, and to stand there alongside him was incredible.
When I went through those boxes with these black and white 8x10 pictures, there was one picture of him in the hospital bed with the phone. And I guess he was taking phone calls with the phone while he was sick. And just his drive and his dedication, I have not seen anybody since I've been in Connecticut that had that kind of spirit, that energy and dedication for the community.
I like to think that I was inspired in that way, and I like to cultivate relationships all across the board because I feel like it's an opportunity for learning.
As much as he taught us and as much as we were inspired, the fact of the matter is, at least from my observation, when he left, no 10 people could fill his shoes. It's like something was gone that we weren't able to fix, like Humpty Dumpty. It just seemed like we all cared and we all had our own little corner to be active in.
Yeah, but he left a void. He left a big
vacuum,
void.
didn't he?
Yeah. When we opened that building, he died 2 weeks later. So we just made it to open that building. But we were on a mission to make sure that building opened, that he could see it before he died, because he worked so hard on that. When you have a leader like him, it's like Martin Luther King. When you have a leader like that, you need to take time to figure out what's next.
What's the positive take? Because I saw a speed up building knocked down. I saw his vacuum that never got filled. I see the Puerto Rican identity fading away with Latinoism. I'm kind of saddened by all that. Is there a silver lining? I'd like to know what it is.
There's a whole group of folks that I could talk about right now, who are Puerto Rican, by the way, who are now ascending into leadership. We're just not as vocal. Maybe we don't draw attention
different.
to ourselves.
It looks different.
It looks different.
And
it's not what we were doing.
Well, what it was just like Willie was just saying, is that people sometimes don't want to change their mode of operation. They have changed their mode of operation, but they're still working. Because I see them on Facebook all the time, all the people that are doing stuff. There's people doing stuff out there, just doing it differently.
Once I got in and I got to know some of the folks in the community, every person I met just kind of associated my role at the gas company as with Cesar. I knew, within the first month that I got to be represented well here for him.
Today, a street and a daycare center are named after him, and his daughter Sarah has worked at the school named after her father since it opened. But the building that housed his office has since been shuttered, and the building that housed Aspira was knocked down to make room for so-called progress. It doesn't, however, minimize the work that one man did for his community.
I know that my father's life experiences were difficult, and I think that it meant something to him to be here and find a sense of community here and build a sense of community here. And I think that kind of drove him to kind of help others find their way when they came here and kind of help people out so that it wouldn't be as difficult for them. I was angry for a while, especially when my father was diagnosed with leukemia and I lost him so quickly. It was very difficult and I had a lot of anger, but now I see that he had his path and his legacy that he had to leave behind for the rest of us.
Well, here's a toast. A toast to Cesar Batalla.
Gente sigue peleando, amigos sigue peleando, por eso sigo peleando. Esta noche fue la noche, esta noche fue la noche, esta noche fue la noche, esta noche fue la noche.
I am Cesar Batalla.
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 Yo soy Cesar Batalla.